The knock came at 6:17 a.m. 3 sharp raps, perfectly timed, like someone practiced them in the mirror. That was the first red flag. Nobody knocks like that unless they want to be heard or feared. I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of my daughter's breathing down the hall. Emma always slept with her door cracked open, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway like she was afraid the dark might steal something from her if she shut it out completely. The second red flag came when I glanced at the security monitor on my nightstand. 3 men, matching navy blue jackets, gold badges that were just a little too shiny, and the letters stitched across their chests in aggressive white thread. HOA compliance and security. I didn't move right away. I didn't have to. Years of federal service had trained my body to stay still while my mind sprinted. Who they were, why they were here, and why my gut had just dropped into my boots. The third red flag? One of them was holding paperwork with my daughter's name on it. I swung my legs out of bed, every muscle coiling tight. Through the monitor, I watched as the tallest one adjusted his belt like a man used to being obeyed. The shorter one leaned in and said something that made them laugh. The last guy, young, nervous, kept glancing at the door like he wasn't sure this was a good idea. It wasn't, because what those men didn't know, what no one in that pristine, rule-obsessed neighborhood knew, was that the house they were standing in front of didn't belong to just another quiet single father. It belonged to the chief deputy of a U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force, and they had come to take my daughter. By the time I reached the hallway, Emma was awake, rubbing her eyes, confusion written all over her face. "Daddy," she whispered, "why are there police outside?" I knelt in front of her, forcing my voice to stay calm, steady, safe. "They are not police," I said, "and they are not taking you anywhere." I told Emma to stay in her room and lock the door. She nodded, brave like her mother used to be, and did exactly what she was told. As soon as the lock clicked, I straightened up and exhaled slowly through my nose. Then I walked to the front door. I didn't open it right away. "Can I help you?" I called through the solid oak. The man in the center spoke, his voice loud, rehearsed, carrying the tone of someone who had never been challenged in his life. "Homeowners Association Compliance Division. We're here regarding an immediate custodial safety concern." Custodial. Safety. Concern. I almost smiled. "I suggest you explain very carefully what you mean," I said. Paper rustled. "Mr. Carter, we have documentation indicating that your daughter is currently in violation of community residency standards, specifically occupancy limits, supervision requirements, and..." I opened the door. All 3 of them took a half step back, not consciously, not deliberately, but instinctively. Predators recognize other predators. Or maybe it was just the look in my eyes. "You have 10 seconds, I said quietly, "to tell me why you're standing on my porch talking about my child." The tall one recovered first. "Sir, we're authorized by the HOA board to remove minors from residences deemed non-compliant until corrective action is taken." I blinked once. "Remove?" I repeated. "Yes, temporarily. She'll be placed with an approved community guardian." That was when I noticed a white van parked at the curb. No markings, no plates on the front. My jaw tightened. "You don't have a court order," I said. It wasn't a question. The nervous one shifted. "We don't need one. HOA bylaws." I raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "I don't care if your bylaws were signed by God himself," I said. "You do not remove a child from her home without a judge's order, law enforcement authority, and a damn good reason." The tall man's expression hardened. "So, if you interfere with an HOA enforcement action, you could be subject to fines, legal action, and what?" I asked. "Arrest?" Silence, because now they were seeing it. The stance, the posture, the calm that only comes from people who stood on the wrong end of guns and lived. I reached into my pocket slowly enough that even the nervous one didn't flinch, and pulled out my badge. Gold, worn, federal. "I'm Chief Deputy Marcus Carter, U.S. Marshals Service," I said. "And if any of you so much as look toward my daughter's room, this conversation ends very differently." The tall man swallowed. That doesn't change HOA authority," he said. "We can now." It changes everything, I replied, because now this isn't a compliance issue. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. It's attempted kidnapping. Behind me, upstairs, I heard Emma's door creak, and somewhere deep in my chest, something old and dangerous woke up, because this was no longer about rules. It was about my daughter. And nobody takes from a U.S. Marshal and walks away. The tallest one tried to recover his authority by straightening his jacket, like fabric and posture could save him now. "Sir," he said, forcing confidence back into his voice, "with all due respect, your federal position doesn't exempt you from HOA regulations. We've dealt with military, judges, even state officials before." I nodded slowly. "And you've never dealt with me." Behind me, I could hear Emma's soft footsteps retreat. Good. She was listening. That meant I could stop worrying about shielding her ears and start focusing on the three idiots on my porch. The nervous one, early 20s, probably thought this job would involve issuing parking warnings and measuring grass height, cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, the issue is that your daughter is technically unsupervised during certain hours. The board voted that single-parent households must." "Stop," I said, holding up a finger. I stepped fully onto the porch, letting the morning sun illuminate the badge clipped to my belt and the scars I didn't bother hiding. One across my knuckles, another near my temple. You don't earn those enforcing pool hours. You don't get to redefine supervision because a room full of retirees with nothing better to do feels uncomfortable, I said. And you don't vote yourselves the right to remove a child. The tall man glanced back at the van. A mistake. He was looking for backup, for reassurance. There was none. "Sir," he said, lowering his voice like we were now colleagues negotiating a misunderstanding, "let's not escalate this. We're just following protocol." I laughed once, short, humorless. That's what everyone says right before they cross a felony line. I pulled my phone from my pocket. No theatrics, no rush, just enough to make the point. "Do you know what happens when a federal officer reports a credible child abduction attempt?" I asked. Because I do. I've led those responses. The nervous one's face drained a color. "You get flagged," I continued. "Your vehicle gets flagged. Your employer gets flagged. And suddenly, every action you've taken in the last 5 years gets looked at under a microscope." The shorter guy scoffed. "You're bluffing." I tapped the screen and hit a contact already starred. "Deputy Alvarez," I said calmly as the line connected. "I need local units and CPS supervisors dispatched to my address. Possible attempted unlawful removal of a minor by non-law enforcement personnel. Yes, HOA involvement." There was a pause. Then, "On it, Chief." I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. "You just made this was," the tall man said. "No," I replied. "You did, when you stepped onto my property with kidnapping paperwork and no legal authority." The shorter one leaned in, voice low. "Look, man, the board chair has connections. Judges, city council. This doesn't have to." I cut him off with a look that could peel paint. "I don't care if your board chair goes for the governor," I said. "Connections don't override federal law." A siren wailed faintly in the distance. That's when things shifted. The nervous one took a step back. "Maybe we should just revisit this. Get legal clarification." The tall man hesitated. Pride battled self-preservation, and pride was losing. "We're not done here," he said, pointing a finger at my chest. "This community has standards." "So do I," I replied, "and one of them is that my daughter sleeps in her own bed tonight." They toned, retreating toward the van with the stiffness of men who knew they'd miscalculated badly. The shorter one shot me a look, anger mixed with something else. Fear, maybe. The van door slid shut. They didn't drive away. Instead, they sat there, engine idling, watching. That's when my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. "You should have handled this quietly. The board doesn't like embarrassment." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back. "Neither do I." The sirens grew louder. 2 patrol cars rolled in first, lights flashing, followed by a county SUV. Officers stepped out, hands resting near holsters, eyes immediately drawn to the unmarked van. I raised a hand and walked down the driveway to meet them. "Morning," one of the officers said, recognizing me instantly. "What's going on, Chief?" "Those gentlemen," I said, nodding toward the van, "attempted to remove my minor daughter under the authority of an HOA. No court order, no law enforcement mandate." The officer's jaw tightened. "You serious?" "As a heart attack." The van door slid open again. The tall man stepped out, trying to look composed. "This is a civil matter," he announced. "HOA enforcement." "Stop talking," the officer snapped. "Hands where I can see them." The look on the tall man's face was priceless. "What? You can't." "You're being detained pending investigation," the officer said. "And if you take one more step, you'll be cuffed." The nervous one stayed seated, eyes glued to the floor. A CPS vehicle arrived next, followed by a plain black SUV. That one made me straighten. The door opened, and a woman stepped out, mid-40s, sharp eyes, sharp suit. "Marcus," she said, "you didn't mention it was this neighborhood." "Didn't think I'd need to," I replied, but they tried to take Emma. Her expression hardened instantly. Then someone made a catastrophic mistake. She turned to the officers. "I want full statements. Now." As they moved to comply, I felt a presence behind me. Emma. She stood at the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide. I knelt immediately. "Hey, you okay?" She nodded. "They're gone." "They will be," I said softly. She looked past me at the flashing lights. Did I do something wrong? That question hit harder than any threat. "No," I said firmly, pulling her into a hug. "You did everything right." The black self-driver door opened again, and a man stepped out this time. Tall, broad, familiar. He smiled grimly. "Chief Carter," he said. "Seems your HOA has a creative interpretation of authority." "Seems so," I replied. He looked at the van, then back at me. "This isn't over." I nodded. "No," I said. "It's just started." By noon, the neighborhood looked like a crime scene instead of a postcard. 2 patrol cars still blocked the cul-de-sac, their lights off now but their presence loud. A CPS supervisor stood under the shade of my oak tree, clipboard tucked against her chest, while a pair of officers questioned the 3 HOA security men separately. The unmarked van had been searched, photographed, and towed. No plates, no commercial registration, and a trunk full of pre-filled temporary relocation forms with children's names already typed in. Emma's name wasn't the only one. That detail made my jaw clench. I sat at the kitchen table across from the CPS supervisor, a woman named Denise with tired eyes and a voice that carried authority without arrogance. Emma sat beside me, coloring quietly, her rabbit tucked under one arm. "I want to be very clear," Denise said, glancing at Emma before lowering her voice. "There is no legal basis, none, for an HOA to remove a child from a home. Ever. Even calling it temporary is a gross misrepresentation." "Then how did this get this far?" I asked. Denise sighed. "Because most people don't know their rights, and because some HOAs exploit that." I leaned back, folding my arms. "How many complaints like this have you seen?" "In this county," she said. "Officially, 0. I raised an eyebrow. "Unofficially," she continued, 3 in the last year. All withdrawn. All families moved shortly after." That's when it clicked. "They scared them out," I said. Denise nodded, and no one wanted to push back. I glanced down at Emma. She was coloring a house with a sun in the corner. Normal. Safe. That's how it should have stayed. "Not this time," I said. Outside, voices rose. I stood and walked to the front window. The HOA board chair had arrived. Eleanor Whitcomb, 72 years old. Perfect posture. Pearl necklace. The kind of woman who smiled while cutting you off at the knees. She stood at the edge of the driveway, gesturing sharply at a police lieutenant. "This is harassment," she said. "Our association has the right to enforce community standards." "Not like this," the lieutenant replied. Not even close. She spotted me in the window. Her smile vanished. "Marcus Carter," she called. "May I speak with you?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "Make it quick," I said. She sniffed. "You embarrassed the board today." "You tried to take my child," I replied. "Perspective." Her lips tightened. "Your personal circumstances have made some residents uncomfortable." "Because I'm a widower," I asked flatly, "or because I don't fit your image?" She bristled. "Single fathers create instability." That was it. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "You don't get to weaponize grief," I said. "And you don't get to decide what a family looks like." She glanced around, noticing the officers, the CPS staff, the neighbors peeking from behind curtains. "This can still be resolved internally," she said, "if you cooperate." I smiled, cold, controlled. "Oh, Eleanor," I said, "internal resolution left the building when you sent men with a van." Her eyes flicked to the black SUV parked across the street. "You've involved federal authorities," she said. "That was unnecessary." That, I replied, was inevitable. Behind her, one of the officers waved me over. "Chief," he said quietly, "you need to see this." He handed me a manila folder retrieved from the van. Inside were HOA board emails. Printed, highlighted, subject, enforcement strategy, non-traditional households. My blood ran cold as I scanned the lines. If we act under safety provisions, CPS involvement can be triggered without formal reporting. Temporary removal creates leverage. Families who resist tend to relocate within 30 to 60 days. This wasn't ignorance. This was strategy. I looked up slowly. Eleanor's face had gone pale. "You want to explain this?" I asked. "That's internal correspondence," she snapped. "You have no right." "I have every right," I said. "And so does the U.S. Attorney's Office." Her mouth opened, closed. The black sub's passenger door opened again, and the man in the suit stepped out, phone to his ear. "Yeah," he said into it. "We're gonna need subpoenas. Today." Eleanor took a step back. "This is outrageous," she said. "We're a private organization." "No," I corrected. "You're a private organization that crossed into criminal conduct. Denise joined us, arms crossed, and you used the threat of CPS to coerce families. That's abuse of process." Eleanor's voice shook now. "We were protecting the community." "You were protecting control," Denise said. A neighbor approached hesitantly, a woman I recognized from down the street. "My sister lived here," she said quietly. "They did this to her. She left in a week." Another man stepped forward. "My grandson's name is on one of those forms." The dam broke. Voices rose. Accusations flew. Officers stepped in to maintain order. Eleanor backed away, stunned, the perfect image cracking. I felt Emma's hand slip into mine. "Daddy," she whispered, "are we in trouble?" I squeezed her hand gently. "No," I said, "they are." That afternoon, the HOA security contract was suspended. By evening, the board's legal counsel had resigned. By nightfall, federal investigators were requesting financial records. I tucked Emma into bed that night, sitting beside her until her breathing slowed. "Are the bad people gone?" she asked sleepily. "They can't hurt us," I said. "Not anymore." As I turned off the light, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "You think you've won. You haven't." I stared at the message, then deleted it. They were right about one thing. This wasn't over. But now, they weren't hunting a quiet family. They had picked a fight with someone who knew how to follow a trail and how to finish it. By the next morning, the neighborhood Facebook group had exploded. I didn't even have to log in to know it. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts from neighbors I barely spoke to, missed calls from unknown numbers, and one voicemail from a man who introduced himself as external counsel for the Whitcomb board. I deleted it without listening. If they wanted to talk, they could do it through the same channels they forced me to open. Federal ones. Emma ate her cereal quietly at the kitchen counter, glancing up at me every time my phone vibrated. "Is it more bad news?" she asked. "Just noise," I said. brushing her hair back. You finish breakfast. I'll walk you to the bus. That routine mattered. Normalcy mattered. The people who tried to take it didn't understand that power isn't just authority, it's stability. And I wasn't about to let them steal that too. As we stepped outside, I noticed the first sign that panic had set in. A moving truck, parked 2 houses down, loading furniture from the Whitcomb residence. Emma noticed it too. Are they moving? Looks like it, I said. She thought for a moment. Because they were mean. I smiled softly. Because they got caught. At the bus stop, a few parents stood in awkward silence. Some nodded at me. One woman, Melissa, I thought, approached, eyes red. I'm sorry, she said. I should have spoken up before. I nodded. You're speaking now. That counts. After the bus pulled away, I headed back inside and finally listened to the voicemail I'd ignored the night before. Mr. Carter, the man said smoothly, this situation has escalated unnecessarily. The board is prepared to issue an apology and financial compensation in exchange for your cooperation in de-escalating federal involvement. I laughed, out loud. Then I forwarded the message to the U.S. attorney handling the case. Within hours, subpoenas were served. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. Their security division was officially classified as an unlicensed private enforcement entity. 2 of the 3 men from my porch were retained for questioning. The nervous one had already lawyered up and was apparently eager to cooperate. Smart kid. The tall one, not so much. I was called downtown that afternoon to give a formal statement. Emma stayed with a trusted neighbor, one of the few who'd been openly supportive from day one. As I walked into the federal building, I felt the familiar shift, the quiet hum of purpose. This was my world. Paperwork, consequences, accountability. And today, it was pointed straight at people who'd never expected it. Chief, Assistant U.S. Attorney Reynolds said, shaking my hand, we've reviewed the emails. This isn't just civil exposure. No, I agreed. It's conspiracy. And coercion, she added. And potentially civil rights violations. I leaned forward. How far up does this go? Reynolds exchanged a look with her colleague, far enough that people are already calling in favors. Good, I said. Let them. That evening, as I drove home, I noticed something else. The white van was back. Not the same one, but close enough. Parked at the edge of the neighborhood, engine off. Watching. I slowed but didn't stop. Took note of the plate. Out of state. Rental. When I pulled into my driveway, the van drove off. That's when I knew this wasn't just about the HOA anymore. Someone else had an interest. I checked the perimeter before going inside, habit kicking in. Emma ran to hug me, chattering about school like nothing in the world was wrong. I let her talk. Later, after she was asleep, I reviewed the day's reports on my tablet. Financial irregularities, shell accounts, payments from an LLC tied to Community Compliance Consulting. That name rang a bell. I searched it. 3 hits, 2 lawsuits, 1 sealed federal inquiry. My stomach tightened. This HOA wasn't acting alone. They were outsourcing intimidation, and they'd gotten sloppy. A knock came at the door just after midnight. Not sharp this time. Careful. I checked the monitor. 1 man, plain clothes, hands visible. I opened the door just enough. Chief Carter, he asked. Name's Harris. Internal Affairs. I raised an eyebrow. That was fast. He nodded grimly. Word is someone's trying to spin this. Paint you as an overreactive federal officer abusing authority. I smiled thinly. Of course they are. They are filing complaints, Harris continued, saying you intimidated HOA representatives with your badge. And it's not sticking, he said, but it's loud. I stepped aside. Come in. He didn't. They are scared, he said instead, and scared people lash out. I know, I replied. He hesitated. You sure your daughter's safe? That question lingered after he left. I checked on Emma again, watching her sleep, the rise and fall of her chest steady and calm. I activated additional security measures that night. Cameras, Alerts, redundancies. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in my career, it was this. When bullies lose their power, they don't disappear. They escalate. And the people behind them, the ones who write the checks and pull the strings, hate losing even more. My phone buzzed once more. New message. Last chance to make this go away. I typed back slowly. You already tried that. You failed. I set the phone down. Hot steady. They thought they were dealing with a homeowner. They were wrong. They were dealing with a father who knew how to dismantle systems, and who had nothing left to lose except the one thing they'd already tried to steal. And that made me very, very dangerous. The next week, the neighborhood shifted in ways that were subtle but unmistakable. Lawns were trimmed with nervous precision. Mailboxes gleamed as if polished by guilt. And the Whitcomb residence? Empty. The moving truck had long since departed, leaving behind only the faint smell of lavender polish and the residue of authority that had once been wielded like a weapon. But the quiet wasn't comfort. It was tension. Every shadow seemed to twitch. Every car that slowed near the driveway made my hand inch toward the door lock. My phone buzzed intermittently with updates from Reynolds, the U.S. attorney, and the local task force. Everyone was on edge, which was fine. That kind of pressure was exactly what this network had underestimated. I spent the morning reviewing the evidence in my home office. The folders from the van, the emails from Eleanor and her board, the contracts, and the shell company records all lined up like pieces in a chess game. Only problem. Someone else had entered the board's game, a more sophisticated operator, the type who doesn't make mistakes in plain sight. The van from the night before was proof. By noon, I decided to take a proactive approach. Emma was at school, safe and oblivious, and I could work the perimeter with clarity. I started with surveillance sweeps, walking the block and noting unusual activity. 3 cars parked irregularly on the next street over. A man loitering by a lamppost with a camera. A woman jogging, but always in the same loop. Patterns were emerging, and patterns are everything in law enforcement. Around mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed again. It was Reynolds. Marcus, she said, voice urgent. We've traced the shell accounts. They are connected to multiple HOA boards in neighboring counties. And, get this, they've been funneling payments to a security contractor in the city. Which we know? I asked, feeling a familiar thrill of discovery tighten in my chest. Not yet, she said. The contract shows these guys are registered under different names, LLCs, some international ties. Whoever's behind this is building a mini-private army of HOA enforcers. I leaned back, rubbing my temple. Sounds like they thought I'd let this slide. Or that nobody would notice until it was too late, she said, which is why I want your input. You know their playbook, Marcus. I told her to send over the full file. By the time I hung up, I was already thinking 3 steps ahead. These people didn't just try to intimidate, they tried to institutionalize fear. That's when the fun began. I started drafting a plan. Step 1, isolate their local players. Step 2, map the financial and legal network. Step 3, turn the system they relied on against them. Step 4, protect them and ensure they couldn't interfere again. Step 1 was immediate. I called a contact in the county police, Lieutenant Moreno, someone I trusted implicitly. I gave her the evidence folders, the photos from the van, the emails, and the contracts. I need officers at every known address for these board members, I said. Discreetly. No alarms, no confrontation unless they act. Understood, she said. We've got it covered. Step 2 required patience. I spent the evening tracing every dollar that flowed through the shell accounts, every email, every suspicious signature. By midnight, patterns emerged. Payoffs, bribes, ghost employees, perfectly legal on paper, illegal in intent. Then came the shadow game. I noticed it while monitoring security footage around my house. A dark SUV parked a block away. The driver sat motionless. At first, I thought it was coincidence. It wasn't. Over the next 2 days, the SUV moved subtly, always keeping me in sight but never engaging. Whoever was inside was smart. They didn't want me to see them directly, just know they were watching. I sent a warning to Reynolds and the local task force. They know we're on to them, I said. And now, they are testing me. She replied simply, "Good. Let's see how they play the next move." That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the dim light of my office, laptop open, surveillance screens flickering. Each shadow, each parked car, each passing stranger was a variable in a complex equation. Patterns reveal intent, and intent leaves mistakes. Around 2:14 a.m., I saw it, a man, dressed in black, approaching my property. Not the van this time. Just one man, confident, slow, calculated. I activated the motion lights. He froze, staring straight at the bright beam, but didn't run. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand, badge clipped to my belt. "State your name," I called. The man's eyes narrowed. "I don't think you want to do that," he said calmly. "Try me," I replied. He smiled faintly, almost admiringly. "Marcus Carter, I've read your reports. Your record is impressive. And you are?" I asked. "A messenger," he said, "from the people who really control the boards you've been investigating." I didn't flinch. "And your message?" He reached into his pocket slowly. I tensed. "Just this," he said, handing me a card. No numbers, no email, just a single line in sharp gold lettering. "Stop digging, or the consequences will extend beyond your borders." I flipped it over. "Nothing. Cute," I said, "but I don't negotiate with threats." His smile widened. "We don't expect you to. We just wanted you to know. We see you." And then he turned and walked back to the SUV, which idled silently down the street. I closed the door behind me, heart rate rising, adrenaline tightening my chest. That wasn't just intimidation. That was a warning. But it was also a mistake. They underestimated what I do for a living. They underestimated that the one thing they couldn't control, the instinct to protect, was the exact same instinct that had made me a U.S. Marshal. And more importantly, they underestimated that I was prepared to follow the trail wherever it led. By morning, I had already logged the encounter with Reynolds, the task force, and internal affairs. Surveillance footage captured the man leaving, his face in shadow, vehicle plate partially obscured, but enough to start tracing. Each detail, each misstep, was evidence. Emma walked into the room, rubbing her eyes. "Dad, you look tired." I said, ruffling her hair. "But I'm fine. How was school?" She shrugged. "Fine. The bus driver said someone was taking pictures of the street. I thought it was weird." I smiled faintly. "Just neighborhood stuff. Nothing to worry about." She nodded, but I saw the flicker of concern in her eyes. That's when I realized it wasn't enough to protect her physically. I had to shield her from fear too. The weeks ahead would be a war of shadows, a chess game where every move counted, every oversight was a liability. They had the advantage of secrecy. I had the advantage of knowledge, authority, and experience. I started pulling together evidence to trace the international payments, to uncover every shell account, and to map the extended network of HOA enforcers. The goal was simple: make them as exposed as they had tried to make me feel. And if they didn't stop, well, I had a list of contingencies. Contingencies that ensured Emma would never be touched, never intimidated, and that those who tried to take her, or any other child, would pay in ways they hadn't even imagined. Because there's a line. And they crossed it. Now, the game was mine to control. And I don't lose games. The takedown didn't come with sirens. It never does. It came quietly, methodically, like gravity finally deciding it was done waiting. 3 weeks after the messenger visit, the web unraveled. The shell companies Reynolds traced weren't just tied to HOAs. They were laundering money through community compliance consulting firms across 4 states. Same playbook everywhere. Intimidate families labeled nonconforming. Push them out, flip homes at a profit, and keep neighborhoods curated for investors who never lived there. And the kids? Collateral. That was a word used in one of the internal memos. That memo sealed their fate. At 5:02 a.m. on a Tuesday, federal warrants were executed simultaneously in 5 counties. Not by local cops, not by private contractors, by U.S. Marshals. My people. I stood in the command center watching the feeds. Doors breached, File seized. Executives let out in cuffs wearing $1,000 pajamas and shocked expressions. The man who'd sent the messenger was pulled from a penthouse office overlooking the city, screaming about phone calls and influence. None of it mattered. Influence doesn't mean much when the evidence is airtight and the charges are federal. Conspiracy, wire fraud, civil rights violations, child endangerment, impersonation of law enforcement, racketeering. The last one made them go quiet. By noon, the story broke nationally. HOA enforcement network exposed in multi-state federal investigation. By evening, resignations poured in. Board members scrambled to claim ignorance. Lawyers issued statements about rogue contractors and misunderstandings. No one believed them. The emails didn't lie. The money trails didn't lie. And the children who'd been frightened out of their homes finally had names and voices. I drove Emma to school that morning like always. No cameras. No strange cars. No shadows. "Dad," she asked as we stopped at the red light, "are the bad people gone now?" I thought about it for a second. Some of them. I said honestly, the ones who mattered. She smiled and went back to humming along with the radio. That afternoon, Reynolds called. "It's done," she said. "The network is dismantled. The HOA boards involved are under receivership. New laws are being drafted, state and federal, to prevent this from ever happening again." I leaned back on the porch, watching the wind move through the trees, and the people who tried to intimidate. "Facing serious time," she said, "including your messenger." He flipped. Of course he did. Power always looks strong, until consequences show up. The neighborhood changed after that. Not overnight, but steadily. The rules became suggestions instead of weapons. The board meetings became quiet. Families stopped whispering. Kids played outside again without parents watching the street like prey animals. One evening, Melissa from down the block knocked on my door. "They're naming the new community center after you," she said. I shook my head immediately. "No," she smiled. "Figured you'd say that." "What about naming it after the families who left?" I said, "The ones who didn't have a badge." Her smile softened. "I'll suggest it." That night, after Emma was asleep, I stood in her doorway longer than usual. I thought about how close they'd come, how thin the line really was, and how many people didn't have the training, the authority, or the luck to stop it when power decided to test them. My phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. For a split second, my muscles tensed. Then I opened it. "This is Eleanor Whitcomb. I was wrong. I'm sorry." I stared at the message, then set the phone down without replying. Apologies don't erase intent. They don't undo fear. And they don't give back stolen peace. What does, that is accountability. A month later, I was reassigned. Promotion. Technically. More oversight. Less field work. More policy. Some people thought it was a reward. They were right. Because now, I could make sure this never happened again. Not here. Not anywhere. Emma asked me once why I still wore my badge even when I didn't have to. "Because it reminds people," she said. I smiled and shook my head. "Because it reminds me," I told her, "who I'm responsible for." She nodded, satisfied, and life moved forward. Quietly, safely. But somewhere out there, every HOA board member who'd ever thought about overstepping their authority remembered one thing. There was a father who didn't back down, a system that collapsed when exposed, and a line that, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed, because you can mess with rules. You can mess with property. You can even mess with power. But you never, ever try to take a child from someone who knows exactly how to bring an empire down, and lives to prove it.